Every Easter, I try to shock my brain with the factuality of the resurrection to try to stimulate faith in my heart. So I want to try to do that for you. Just funny how that is. I don't know, our faith. Christianity has a lot of voltage, because it's based on real historical facts. That's something that settles on the bottom of our mind and heart, and we need to stir it up once in a while and let it wake us up like a splash of cold water in the face. A jolt. There's certainly a jolt in the resurrection account today. When you hear accounts of the resurrection, they're told very simply. They aren't embellished like legends, They very simple, matter-of-fact, very direct way describe what happened. And the total shock and bewilderment. In fact, being dumbstruck, awestruck at this event. And their mind trying to assimilate this thing that doesn't seem to correspond to the physical universe and what they know in their experience. This guy was dead. We saw him pulverized, beaten to a pulp. And no one expected this. No one expected this. The shock of that. Even though he told them many times exactly what would happen in detail, they didn't believe him. The women are going there, they're going with spices to anoint the body. They're expecting to find his pulverized body in there, and they're very compassionate and merciful. This corporal work of mercy they want to perform, but they're not expecting the resurrection, That jolt, we need to feel that. The unexpected happening here, this catastrophe has occurred in their world. They're shocked with grief and just absolutely bewildered, perplexed in the upper room. The apostles hiding for fear in this volatile situation, afraid they're going to get killed. 2. And the last thing in the world they're thinking about probably is the resurrection. This is just unexpected. The women are going there. Everybody's just rocked. Their world is rocked by this catastrophe. And the seeming victory of the Pharisees and the chief priests, the religious leaders, have won because, if he's the Messiah, how did he get crucified? How would the Messiah be crucified by the Gentiles, subject to a humiliating death of someone who's accursed by God? There's no way it's the Messiah. So they stamped out this uprising. And they're certainly not expecting what's about to happen. So that's what I want to focus on a little bit here, is just let that factuality dash into our brain in the same way they're experiencing. You try to imagine what that's like for them to try and assimilate this new data. And oh my goodness, the cognitive dissonance, they're just absolutely awestruck at the fact of the resurrection. The Catechism, paragraph 643, says something pretty bold, to say the least. It says this: it is impossible not to acknowledge the resurrection as an historical fact. It's impossible not to acknowledge it as an historical fact. Man, how can the church make such a bold claim? Impossible? Their faith in the resurrection, the early church faith in the resurrection, was born with the help of grace, of course. Opened their heart. But still, it was born from the direct experience of the reality of the risen Jesus. Direct experience. It's the only way to account for the facts. The spread, growth, and development of Christianity makes no sense. The fact that we're here this morning makes no sense unless it really happened. From the very beginning, this was what was preached. This is not some legend that grew up centuries later, decades later, in some far-flung corner of the Roman Empire. From ground zero, the resurrection weeks later began to be proclaimed right in the epicenter of where these events took place, where it was the most volatile, and something transformed. Not one person had some mystical experience. All the apostles and the women and even 500 others, St. Paul says, up to 500 at one time saw the risen Lord. How do you account for this transformation of these men to go into the middle of the temple and begin proclaiming this and put it right in the Sanhedrin's face? You kill the author of life. They tell them right to their face. I mean, they're on the back foot, They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The Sanhedrin, the religious leaders, they're like in shock at the boldness of the apostles. And they're just not sure what to do about this thing. And they can't stop it. They can't stop it. Acts chapter 6, verse 7 says, a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith. Okay, these aren't ignorant, illiterate people off in some far, shadowy, dark corner of the Roman Empire centuries later or something, and this legend grew up about something. No, this is immediate, direct. That shock, that cold splash of water in the face, people could verify the facts of the case. There were so many eyewitnesses of the resurrection, and the fact that this man was put to a brutal death, that he was dead, is indisputed. Very far-fetched to imagine he wasn't dead. He was dead. Dedius dedere, okay? He was dead. The Romans know how to execute somebody, believe me. And where he was buried was clearly recorded. He was put into the tomb of a very noteworthy individual who was named in all the Gospels, Joseph of Arimathea. Everybody knows this guy. He's on the Sanhedrin. A tomb that no one had ever been buried before. All these facts could be verified by everybody, and they were there from the beginning. Tomb hewn out of rock, a fresh new tomb. Anybody could go and check it. If his body was in that tomb, all they would have to say is, look, this is a bogus claim because, look, we have the body in the tomb. The body wasn't in the tomb. That's a historical fact, folks. That is not disputed. We have to deal with the empty tomb. But the Jews, the religious leaders, insisted on a Roman guard, and in doing so, really put themselves in a weird position. What did the apostles, these guys who were cowering for fear in the upper room and denying our Lord like St. Peter, the leader, suddenly become SEAL Team 6 and overcome a Roman guard made up typically of 16 soldiers, and there were probably more because of the volatility of the situation. And they slide down ropes and camo. All right. No, that didn't happen. It's ludicrous to think the body was stolen. And that tomb was sealed, BTW, okay? That's like either wax or clay, a rope stretched across the stone, and then sealed with the imprint of Rome, which carries the weight and authority of the Roman Empire. You break that seal and you're subject to the penalty of death. So it was sealed and guarded is also a indisputed fact. The Jews do not deny these things, and that the tomb was empty. They just still maintain this far-fetched notion that the body was stolen. All right, look, when you look at the whole thing and step back from it, from our purview here, many centuries later, and look at it, how do you account for this? It's so inconceivable, the spread, growth, and development of Christianity. This band of guys then went out and put it all on the line and died for this. truth of the resurrection. They didn't shy away from it. It was there from the very beginning. Testimony about the resurrection was integral to the proclamation of the gospel. It was absolutely central to their testimony, was supported by this. How did so many people believe this? Is everybody in the world gullible at that time? No, they were as skeptical as we are. Starting with the apostles themselves were incredulous. When the women came to them, they thought, this seems like an idle tale. It seemed like an idle tale to them, and they didn't believe them. And then our Lord appeared to two disciples on the road to Emmaus. They came and reported to the apostles. They didn't believe them either. They were incredulous. The whole world was incredulous. The Greeks had a hard time with this. What are you talking about? Resurrection of the body? St. Paul tried to explain this to them in the Areopagus in Athens. And they just laughed them off, scoffed at this idea, this notion. Okay, how did this thing gain traction, this Christian movement gain so much traction, become this tidal wave sweeping across the world and completely demolishing pagan temples everywhere it went, and establishing this new religion on the face of the earth, where eventually, in less than 4 centuries, the Roman emperor is going to become a disciple of this crucified carpenter from Nazareth? How in the world do you explain this? Why do these guys do this, imperil themselves? St. Paul says, why am I in peril every hour for this? If this isn't true, what do I hope to gain from this? I mean, why would we be misrepresenting God by spreading some kind of hoax or fabrication, concoction, invention of man? This is no cleverly devised myth. We're just telling you, very simply, the facts of what happened. We, as St. Peter said in the Acts of the Apostles today, we're just witnesses of these things. We saw these things. We experienced them. There's just something so salty about Christianity. It's so sharp and tangy about it because it's not just some man-made religion, nice, fanciful, whimsical tales based on metaphors and myths or something like that. It's based on real historical facts. When that dashes against my brain, it starts to move the furniture around and help me come to reality. And I feel it working on my brain, and then you feel it moving your heart, disposing you to make the act of faith in the risen Lord. And ponder the power that it took for him to do this. This man who has life in himself, who is the resurrection and the life, the way, the truth, and the life, who has the power to lay his life down and power to take it up again. This candle here burning in front of me is the Easter candle. Every Easter we light a new one. Last night we blessed it and prepared it. That flame represents what's at the heart of our faith, the power of the resurrection. And it's real. It's historical. It happened. It's reality. The fact of the resurrection. Let that dash against our brain. And then to think, by virtue of our baptism, we are now tapped into that power of the resurrection.